I'm Vanessa Wang. I'm a program manager here at Google. I work in developer relations.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I'm Meggin. I work in Chrome. I manage a team of tech writers.
I'm Ed Cable. I lead the global community at the MIFOS initiative.
Wensel. I'm a software engineer, and I don't have a mic. And I am a founder of Compassionate Coding.
Hi, my name is Aysegul, and I am a software engineer and Google Developer Expert for Angular team and web development. And I'm one of the organizers of tonight with Vanessa and Tomomi. So we will going to start with some questions, but feel free to ask any questions. And the microphone is there if you could get online. But first, I wanted to tell everyone about my personal first open source contribution. It happened to be during SFHTML5, the first ever one that I joined. And luckily, it was Vanessa's first contribution as well. I was totally clueless at the time. I didn't call myself a developer at the time. I was a designer. I walked in, and I assume everyone else knows what they're talking about. Everyone else knew what we were doing. I was terrified, but Peter was there. So there was a great documentation. There was a list of things that we could contribute to. And all I did was to look at the rest of the contributions and just change some of the wordings and some of the documentations. And it was such a great experience. Do you guys remember your first open source contribution?
Let's see. Probably the first. I was working on a gem at a company, Ruby Gem, and it was actually like I don't even get credit on GitHub actually because we were like pair programming and it was under someone else's name, but they added my name later to the gem. But yeah, it was probably that. I don't even remember what it was doing, but yeah, very exciting story. I know.
Yeah, for me, it was just similar, like fixing a small bug in our software, and the members of our community, knowing that I'm not a developer, they're really happy that I made my first pull request. I think that's been the only one. So.
My first open source project would have been fixing a typo in a Chrome extensions document. And I think it took me like a week to figure out how to build Chrome to like change a word. It's better now, but it was pretty tough back then.
Yeah, it was funny, like when Aysegul and I were talking earlier, we discovered that our first open source project was exactly the same one, and was working on a documentation project. And I'd been a writer for a long time, but this was the first time I was doing something that was open source and immediately visible to the public. It was terrifying, but it was great.
We can start with this first question.
Yeah, hi. I guess mostly toward Meggin on the diversity surveys. There are areas of diversity which, when I see these surveys, which are these dimensions never seem to be included. There are three of them that I can think of off the top of my head. That is on queerness and ageism and abilityism. In other words, people with ability challenges, queer people. As open as San Francisco is, I'm still seen as a queer man. Some issues in the office on that sometimes. And also, as an older person, there is a huge problem with ageism in the tech community. So all of these are things that I've not seen covered by diversity surveys, and they are also important. Not that gender and race are still incredibly important as well, but those are other things as well that I think also should be a part of looking at inclusive diversity.
I should say yes, and please join my project, and then put that in the survey. And actually Stack Overflow this year did do a lot on demographics. They tried to do more, I think, and they even looked at AI a bit, which is like human interaction and compassion. I think one of the problems that's facing a lot of these surveys, at least what I'm looking at, is that they're trying to hit what's a medium in the world. And when you hear that, it's like when I hear, I probably shouldn't say this because it's being recorded, but it's fine. It's the same thing when people say trickle down. We can't actually help people if we narrow the scope. So So I didn't put all that into the slide, but maybe next time I will just put like 8,000 things in it to be truly inclusive, because all those things are really important.
Hi, my name is Michael Iseri, and my question is to April and Meggin, and anyone else. For me, I'm a cross-disciplinary person. I'm actually a full-time practicing attorney who does programming. I'm at the Center for Accessible Technology, and I created a program that talks in 37 languages and dynamically completes legal services such as expungements and emergency restraining orders. And my question to you is, I'm also on the chair of diversity for new attorneys. In the legal field, there's a lot of discrimination against people with disabilities. The stats for that is about, as you know, 15 to 20% of people in the world population has disabilities. Law students have roughly about 1 to 2% of students have disabilities. And in law firms and practices, it's about 0.4% of attorneys have disabilities. And I was just curious about your take in a technology field and other cross-disciplinary fields you experience about what has been some of the successes and lessons you learned from failures in terms of initiatives of reaching out to either people with disabilities or other sectors and minority groups, like that gentleman in front of me who spoke about LGBT, ageism, and of course abilityism. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, what you're working on sounds awesome. So kudos to you for that. As you kept talking, I was like, wow, that's really cool. So that's awesome. And I'm so glad you brought up this issue. I mean, both of you, because all of this matters. That's the point, is like every person's individual things matters, like even the things that have not been mentioned, like that all matters. And it's all important. And unfortunately, we're not seeing much activity in any of these. We are seeing, like, it's funny because it's like, I mean, funny in like a horrible, like kind of, way, but that we're seeing some activity in for some of these groups, but more than others. But overall, that set is still very, very small in terms of initiatives. So I don't even know, and I'm somebody who like follows people like that speak about ableism and all this stuff on Twitter, and I don't even know about these successful initiatives because there just are so few. Like, we definitely need more of this, and I'm glad you brought it up. And I'm sad that that's all I can say on the matter, because clearly we need to do more. And I think thank you for bringing light to that.
Just to add to that, when I started this crazy thing a few months ago and started talking to a lot of people, anyone who would listen for 5 minutes, I formed a really cool partnership with someone named Rob Dotson, who is pretty active in the web accessibility community. He's a pretty cool developer advocate. And he and I are collaborating on a different project from this one, which is sort of a little pet project, on actually building a documentation site that is intentionally inclusive. And his focus is absolutely on the kind of whole disabilities community. I'm not an expert at that, but I appreciate what he's trying to do, and I've been really humbled by the fact that like there are so many people who need this, and nothing's happening. I also I don't want to go like hog it up, but we had an internal diversity summit. And there was this really cool talk about how almost everyone in the baby boomer generation is going to be disabled in like 10 years. So like, we're kind of in trouble.
At the Center for Accessible Technology, we have a model in which everybody's going to need accessible technology as they age.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
so the percentage is not 15 or 20%, but more like 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question on this. One thing that I hear often is that when we're talking about diversity is, oh, let's solve it for this group of people, and then we'll think about the rest of it. And that kind of hurts me very much. Do you see that, and how do you respond to that most of the time?
Yeah, so again, like all of this is very important, and we need to be caring about all of this at the same time. I mean, that's the thing, is you don't like say, okay, I mean, this isn't like a triage situation where we need to figure out who gets to matter in tech. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, why is this even an issue? Like, and so that's what I try to do with compassionate coding is I'm not like, oh, let's get more women into tech, let's get more this into tech. Like, no, I'm just like, let's actually like see each other as human beings with complex, traits of all sorts, and all of us have felt like we didn't belong for various reasons, I'm sure. I mean, like, I understand, and this is why I have to have compassion, like, I understand, those people who feel like, no one ever talks about me, they're always talking about diversity. Like, I understand that too. And so, like, I think we all, need to feel like we belong. So I think, yeah, this whole prioritization thing is like a non-issue for me. I mean, we all get to belong. We all matter.
So hello. So I have some comments, maybe questions about first presentation. So it was really kind of interesting presentation, and I think we all agree with kind of main kind of message to be nice to each other. However, like I think there are a lot of kind of things which are not really kind of engineers are not kind of maybe they are also victim of a system. Let's say example of trying to be the best engineer. Of course, like if you was hired in a company and paid, you have to prove every time that you are the best engineer. That's why you paid for this. So it's not kind of fault of this engineer. It's kind of fault of the system which kind of requires him to prove every time that you are the best. This might be one thing. So what I'm trying to say, like it's pretty much responsibility of the system to make this kind of being nice thing to happen. So that's my message. And maybe another like example, let's say if you want to work at Google, you definitely need to be the best engineer. And we should not we cannot complain that Google will reject you because you're not the best engineer. Yes, I think that's a great thing. And another thing I also see many times, we have some very kind of unstable situation in technology, where we have a lot of engineers with very kind of a little technical background. Some of them just got some maybe boot camp, like 6 months and whatever, maybe 12 months. And our engineers have maybe years of experience, and we do not have really kind of enforced any technical standards. And sometimes I feel like we have a lot of unprofessional engineers in this area, just because there is hype, we don't have enough people to hire. And then, of course, somebody may be upset because of code review, because he's definitely not qualified, and maybe he was not supposed even to be in this position. And I think the situation should be addressed in other way. Like it should be addressed, okay, like let this person to learn. That person should not be upset because somebody is making his like observation to his code, but that person should be happy that somebody really helps him to become better. I think that's kind of comments to your presentation.
Thank you for those comments. You clearly feel very strongly about this, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. So if the message that you took away was that I'm suggesting we just be nice to each other in tech, I failed. Because I thought, I did try to make it a point in my presentation that that's actually not what compassion is about at all. Compassion is about reducing suffering for everyone involved in the process. So for example, it sounds like you're suffering because of these people who may not have as much experience as you, and so they're making mistakes. You refer to them as unprofessional. I might use a less judgmental term. I might say that they could benefit from mentoring. I do agree with you that there's a system problem here, and this is why I think we need to completely change the culture of tech from the ground up. Like, if I could burn it down, I would, and start over. But since I can't, I'm trying to, like do the refactoring while it's live, right? And so doing what I can. But yeah, so to that point, also, so this is being recorded, I just have to say, all the people on Twitter who are talking about like, well, this is more of a comment, not a question. This is like the peak example. But I've said many times that I actually welcome comments. So again, I thank you for your thoughts, and I would love to discuss this further.
Yeah, just maybe another comment, like, let's say we have in medicine, yes, in order to be doctor, you have to pass all this certification to be able kind of to do this trade. In technology, we have a more liberal approach in this area. So, and I have another question for this financial presentation. I'm trying to understand, like, how this actually works. Let's say, like, is it supposed to be managed by US banks, or like it should be kind of different approach, because we know how difficult this area of banking, financial, with a lot of regulations, and I'm not sure how it will work in other countries if you try to make this application accessible to everybody in different countries.
Yeah, so primarily our software is used in more emerging markets in other countries and continents like Africa and throughout South Asia and Southeast Asia. And so typically, we work with our local partners who handle the local regulations, but we are starting to see some adoption. Like we have a bank in Germany who adopted the software, and they had to go through a number of audits to make sure it complied with local practices. So primarily it's been in more emerging markets, but gradually we're starting to see some adoption in more heavily regulated markets like US and Europe. So.
And then another question in this area. So I think a lot of people maybe from those countries may be afraid that this banking system will kind of will track what they're doing, and they may feel uncomfortable because of this. Like if you kind of do all the operation in cash, nobody can monitor what you're doing. If you try to bring all in the system, then system will know what you're doing, and people may be not really kind of willing, will be happy to accept this system. What do you think about this kind of side of?
Yeah, so like organizations like the Gates Foundation, they really advocate for tiered KYC, where you have different levels of know your customer information in which you identify yourself, and then based on having more information that you've shared, you have higher transaction limits that you can utilize. And then there's a lot going now in the digital identity space as well. Recently when we were at OSCON, there was a lot happening with the Hyperledger Indie project to help, provide like shared identities if there's a country that doesn't have a national identity. So yeah, this identity and privacy is a big space, and we're trying to just make sure within our framework we have, the proper tools to capture and measure and monitor the necessary data points and whatnot. So.
Thank you.
Hi. My first question is about how to manage to balance between profit when I start up and making your code like open source. Because I'm really into open source things and I really want to open my code. But on the other hand, I have my investor who has, oh no, you can't share this with anyone. You can even share your idea. So how to manage this?
Well, there are lots of startups that are doing both, right? I work on one. So we have lots of open source projects, but people usually add extra stuff to it that is more sellable too. It depends on your model, but in my experience, working on an open source project keeps the project quality much higher, and it motivates developers much more.
Yeah, and so for our project, we're really trying to emphasize that ultimately, like core banking software should become like commoditized software, that there really isn't any value in that, and we try and emphasize that the value lies in the specific application or service or user experience that you're building on top of the infrastructure. So we have a number of partners who have like mobile money integrations with a specific mobile money provider, or they have a specific workflow or a specific set of reports that they support, and they keep that, as their proprietary solution, but then they still contribute back to the core, common functionality that's in the software. But that's something that we, have to work closely with within our space. So.
If everyone's done, everyone on the panel's done. So hi. Hi everyone. My name is Amel Hussein. I'm a software engineer at Boku. My job title literally is Senior Open Web Engineer. So we do a lot of open source work. So Grunt came out of my company. We contribute a lot to Babel, D3, you name it. So a ton of pretty big open source projects. And so my feedback for you is, first of all, ideas are like penny, like, I don't know, like they're worth pennies, right? It's all about the execution. You should never feel shy about sharing your idea. Someone across the world is probably having the same idea at the same time you realized it as well. But in terms of like open source software, like so I think there's free and open source, right? Just to actually be specific about it. So free and open source software is more secure, just like Aysegul pointed out. The quality is better, and really like, I often laugh about like JavaScript applications that are like closed source because you really are shipping your code. It's right there in the browser. So it's like it's kind of ridiculous actually. Your API. I mean, well, okay, your server might be secure. Like, sure, your secrets, your keys and stuff like that should be secure, but the data your server's returning is also public. So really. I mean, I think Google, maybe their search algorithm index is the only thing that should be private because, people will try to rig it, right? But besides that, there's no, and Google maybe even shouldn't have a free pass, right? So everything should be free and open source, and software is a utility, and it's for the public good. So that's my open source pitch to you.
Thank you so much, actually.
Thank you.
And I mean, here in Silicon Valley, you have such a different mentality. I'm from Brazil, and there it's people still have that feeling about sharing. So it's like introducing. It's just in the beginning. So one of my questions is how to get this culture like more public there, like. How can I, as a developer and a startup owner, can I help increase this mentality?
There are so many companies. Google is one, and Slack is one that has the open source projects open, and you can show their business plan. If you're talking to your investors specifically, just talk to their language and show that with this model, they're able to hire better engineers and they're able to do a great job and make money as well. Just showing that would be one. The other thing is, I don't know if you have the chance, have a Code for Good week in Brazil and somehow teach the people that culture too. Because if you don't bring together people and give them the opportunity, it will be hard for that culture to be born by itself.
Nice. Thank you.
Anybody else wants that?
Yeah, I think going back to like what April was saying earlier, emphasize the compassion, show the value of belonging to an open source community and how much collaboration and sharing there is. And I think also, just show beyond like the costs of, beyond like just free and open source software being free, but that it's much easier to maintain if it's shared back with the community and you're not having to develop it on your own. You have, many eyes like fixing bugs and looking and improving the quality, but everybody contributing to the overall maintenance of the software itself. So.
Hi. Okay, I think need a step stool or comfier heels. So,
Off, or can someone help her there so it's
or can I?
proper for her?
Right, there we go. Thanks. Okay. I'm Morgan. I have a question for April. So it seems like in your talk there's a lot of responsibility putting into the hands of tech workers without the backup of regulation or legal policy. So like, for example, in Europe, you see things like the GDPR and, with the whole right to be forgotten coming in to really protect consumer and user rights. So I guess my question is two-part. First, do you see that happening in America? And kind of, do you know of any organizations working towards that? And then second, what do tech workers do when there isn't the legal protection to back up when they see something unethical happening in their company?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I'm no legal expert, and I don't claim to be, so I probably don't have much to add here. But I think, like, in trying to make change, because I do this, through my veganism and through everything too, and there's a lot of different angles that you can come at, things with. Like, I could try to push for like the banning of meat, like law, right? But like that's not the angle I take because it just doesn't appeal to me, right? And so I think different people are taking different angles. I think there are some groups pursuing legal things and whatnot. I'm sure I'm not very familiar with them because personally, like, that other stuff doesn't interest me very much. And it's just, I don't know, it doesn't resonate with me. But, I'm sure, again, but I support the people who come at things from different angles because, we're working towards the same thing and, but I think as far as tech workers and legal protections, I mean, there are definitely whistleblower protections that are there. But I think more than that, I think sometimes tech workers are pretty powerful for other reasons, aside from like legal reasons. I think, the skills that we have are highly in demand right now, and so we have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. I mentor a lot of engineers who are afraid to do the smallest things because they're afraid of losing their jobs, and I'm like, that's not something you need to worry about. Like, I mean, in general, obviously I can't say a blanket statement, but I mean, in general, it's not a problem to worry about. So I think, I'm excited about what tech workers can do if they stop being afraid and stop, just being obsessed with themselves and, their toys and stuff, and actually like take a chance, because again, we're all going to die anyway, right? So like, why not? If we're going to risk on these like silly startups doing nothing, why not actually risk for something that matters?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Soham Mehta. I have a question for all of you in general. So there were a lot of projects which I was interested in. Currently, I'm interning and working on a financial inclusion project for a company where I'm building a chatbot where you can ask and get your transaction and insights into them. So my question will be, since I'm interning and my college is on, I cannot contribute right now or in a stipulated period of time. How can I contact you and work for you over a period of time? Like, how can I reach out to you to work for your project?
That's a great question.
Yes.
Who do you want? Do you want to start?
I mean, I'm not like hiring people,
Right,
but
yeah.
I mean, like, so that's why I'm just like pass. But I mean, I have a newsletter if you'd like to sign up at compassionatecoding.com.
Yeah, the best way for us would just to be to sign up for our project mailing list, and then when you're ready to contribute, introduce yourself on the list, and let people know your skill set and how you'd like to get involved. And then we also have forms for volunteers to sign up on our website too. And we do have an intern working on a chatbot for our software as well too. So it'd be good to talk about that.
Awesome. I'll message. So these can be remote. Like, you don't need to be specifically at your offices, right? You can work remotely from your colleges.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That is okay.
yeah. Like we have no office for our
Right,
project.
right.
We're all remote.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. Thank you.
And all of our projects are listed at codeforgoodweek.org.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll be in Seattle next week, working from Seattle on this part of the time. So if anyone's working with me, I will actually be remote. But that said, the Slack channel is really cool because even if you can't work on it, you can still listen. And if you create an issue or whatever in GitHub too and be like, I'm here, then you'll be part of the communication.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for questions. Is there any last action calls that you guys want to make? So please check out the projects, and the GitHub links are on our website, and start contributing. And while we are here, we have a little bit more time, and please ask us any questions that you might have. We really, really want you to feel empowered today to make your first contribution, if you haven't already. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.